All right, welcome to the This One Time podcast. I'm Brady Jolly. I am with my friend Jeff Brust. Jeff is with Cole Publishing, which has a lot of magazines and digital and print. So they have Pumper, Cleaner, Municipal Sewer and Water, Plumber Magazine, Portable Restroom Operator, Treatment Plant Operator, On-Site Installers, Dig Different, all print and digital. Cole Publishing. Thanks for being with us, Jeff. We hear that you have a story about the trades.
I do have a trade story, Brady. Thanks for having me on. So my trade story is going to go back to 1979. And 1979 is the year Cole Publishing started. There was a septic pumper located in Three Lakes, Wisconsin, by the name of Pete Lewan, who had an old septic truck and wanted a new septic truck. So he's thinking to himself, Three Lakes, Wisconsin's in the middle of nowhere, way northern Wisconsin, population 1,500 people. And he's got this septic truck to get rid of. And where do you sell a septic truck? You don't want to sell it to your competitor because you're, giving their business some equipment that maybe they need. And he's like, how do I ditch this truck, but not locally? So he and his buddy by the name of Bob Kendall decided that they were going to start essentially like a little newsletter that they were going to send to other septic pumpers in Wisconsin under the guise that they were going to sell this truck in there, but along with some info.
That's genius.
So out of that, the Pumper magazine was born in June of 1979. And the way they got the original mailing list is they literally went through the yellow pages, which were a thing back then, and got as many yellow page books as they could around Wisconsin and pulled out all the septic pumpers information. And they mailed out like a little flyer. It had some basic information and tried to peddle Pete's truck. Well, it caught on like gangbusters right away because the pumper community at that time basically got no respect. They were the Rodney Dangerfield of the service industry. So they got no respect, and they were glad to see this coalition of like septic pumpers kind of getting some information and being able to peddle their wares. And it quickly grew into a national publication. Within a year, it grew into a national publication where septic pumpers could get information, learn how to build their business, and sell their trucks. And at that time, realized there is no Facebook Marketplace, there is no Craigslist, there is no machinery trader. So to sell your
let me stop. So was Pete at that time, after it kind of took off, did he like go away from the septic business and start focusing on pumper, or was he running them both at the same time?
Simultaneous for the first few years. He did eventually sell it. It took a couple of years before the business actually, like a year and a half before the business actually grew into Pete selling off the septic business and then becoming part of, Cole Publishing full time per se.
Unbelievable. And then what happened? How did that transition to now? And like, what was that transition period like?
Well, in 1979, they started that Pumper magazine. And then shortly thereafter, in 1981, they started what was called the Pumper Show, which would eventually become the Pumper and Cleaner Expo, which would eventually become the Wet Show. So once they created that magazine, all of the readers of Pumper magazine said like, hey, this is great to be able to read about other pumpers, but we want to meet other pumpers. So Pete and Bob basically went to the Opryland Hotel in 1981, I believe it was, and said, hey, we want to rent some exhibit space. We're going to bring pumper trucks in here. And they're like, okay. And then all of a sudden that thing starts taking off where they're bringing in, originally it was like about 40,000 square feet. And to put that into perspective, I mean, it's 1/10, not even, it's 1/12 or 1/15 the size of the current Wet Show. Wow. So they had this little room full of pumper trucks. These pumpers got together, drank beer, talked about their business, had a great time. And then it grew into the current modern day Wet Show.
The Wet Show, which is a massive industry show I've been to several times. Awesome show. And into, what did you say, 6 different publications now?
Yeah. So what happened is, I mean, Pumper was great. Then all of a sudden the drain cleaning industry in 1984, 85-ish decided, hey, we want our own representation as well. So this is still before I didn't come to the company until 1997. So then in 1984-ish, 85-ish, they launched the Cleaner magazine. And Cleaners for sewer and drain cleaning contractors, which has kind of always typically been like a fringe of plumbing. And they launched that magazine, which also quickly grew. And then that's when they renamed the Pumper Show into the Pumper and Cleaner Environmental Expo, which is a mouthful. And then that show
Okay.
grew, and they continued on with those two publications in the Pumper and Cleaner Environmental Expo until 1997-ish. I came into the picture, and I was young and full of piss and vinegar at the time. I was in my kind of mid 20s. I spent 4 years in the Navy and then went to college, so I didn't get my first full-time career until I came here. I've been here my entire adult life. The owner retired pretty young. Bob had bought out Pete. I don't know how much time you have here. Bob bought out Pete.
Unlimited.
Bob bought out Pete in the late 80s. So in the late 80s, Pete basically went on to different things. And then Bob ran the company by himself until the mid 90s. And he retired at a pretty young age and got another guy to run it. I came in there in 97. And then by 99, there was only 9 employees. We still had Pumper and Cleaner in that show. And then by 99, the new guy who was running it decided he wanted to retire. And they asked me, where did I see my future at the company? I said, well, I want to run it. And they're like, well, here's an arrogant little 20-year-old. But at the time, there wasn't much to lose there. It wasn't a huge company. But luckily, Bob threw me the bone, and I went gangbusters and launched all those other titles. We grew the show into being the wet show at the time, which became an all-encompassing, anything that touched wastewater type show. So we did a lot. We did one acquisition. The Pro magazine was an acquisition, and then the rest of those we just launched. And we grew from 8 or 9 employees up to, at our peak, was probably close to 60.
Wow.
And we're still in the 50s. COVID knocked us down a little bit. And then, just print. Print is a little bit smaller segment than it was, but our digital brands are growing. So we're still in the 50s, but all those brands kind of came after, the late 1990s. So over the last 20 years, we've been growing those brands.
What an unbelievable entrepreneurship story that Pete had, just like being an entrepreneur, trying to get creative to sell a truck. And the next thing you know, he creates this thing 45 years ago that is now like a massive impact on the industry, a show that thousands of people come to every year. I mean, what an incredible story. I love that.
Yeah, it is. And what's really cool about it was literally just those 2 guys doing it out of their house to begin with. And everybody, even when we owned the Pumper Cleaner show, the wet show, up until about 10 years ago. And everyone had this vision that this was just this massive company of hundreds of people, undertaking this big, probably, if not the biggest on-site wastewater show in North America, one of them. And everybody always thought, and then little did they know, it's literally just like 24 people handling this whole thing out of a tiny little town in northern Wisconsin. And we have Bob and Pete to thank for all of that.
Really cool. I think it's also a lesson in, Pete could have easily said, you know what, I just wanted to sell my truck. I'm good. I don't want to run with this. And being an entrepreneur, he's like, hey, we got something here. Let's go. And look what it turned into.
That's what's cool about, I always think the best entrepreneurial stories are problem solving stories. I have a stepson who wants to be an entrepreneur, but he really doesn't know what that means. He always just, like, if he sees it on Instagram, if it's window washing, that's his flavor of the week. He saw a guy got rich window washing.
Sure.
And I say, it's like, find the problem and solution. And I think that's what Pete and Bob did. The problem was pumpers didn't have a community, and they created a community. And I think that's the best way to start a new endeavor in entrepreneurship, other than the obvious ones that we know work,
Sure.
But
well, Jeff, thanks for sharing the story. It's really cool. Can you tell everybody where they can find you guys and what you may be able to do to help them?
Yeah, it's I just like sharing the story, but we are at coalpublishing.com. You can see all those titles there. If it touches wastewater, we're involved in it, and we enjoy doing it. All of our staff has been here a long time, and I appreciate you having me on, Brady.
Heck yeah, man. Well, thanks. It was great chatting with you, Jeff.